Good morning. Is that too loud? Did I wake you up? I woke myself up. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the 2021 Multi-Sector General Permit Stakeholder Meeting. If you're not dealing with stormwater, you're in the wrong room. But no, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your time. My name is Rebecca Villalba. I am the team leader for the Stormwater team in the Water Quality Division here at TCEQ. And we will first go through and introduce ourselves. But I would like to, first of all, introduce our section manager, Vanna Miramontes. She is our new section manager. She took on the position in June, or was it May? May of this year. So she would like to say a few words, please.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to use the opportunity. I know a lot of you have worked with Rebecca and worked with the TCQ and have probably worked with Chris Linendahl over the years. So when Chris retired, I took his position in May. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to introduce myself. And of course, thank you guys for coming. I hear there's a lot of people on webcam, which is great. And, you know, I think it's really great that you guys are willing to come and talk with us on the front end. I think that helps us prevent having issues when we're, in crunch time trying to get this issued on time. So thank you guys for coming, and just provide any comments that you have, and we'll certainly consider them. And thank you, Rebecca and her team, for being prepared and ready to go and trying to meet our schedule, because what is probably a year and a half, it seems like a long time, but in bureaucracy world that goes like that. So I think you guys know how that is. So thank you so much. I have to run, but my number is 6922. If you ever have any questions, if you can't get in touch with Rebecca, I'll be happy to help you with any issues that you have. So with that, have a good day and happy Friday.
Thank you, Vanna. Okay, so we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves. And as Vanna said, we have plenty of people joining us, not just here, but also over the webcast. We have over 200 people that are on webcast, so we're not going to definitely have time to have them introduce themselves, but we will go through and introduce ourselves, the ones that are here in the room. So we'll go ahead and start with Hannah.
Yeah, my name is Hannah Nielsen, and I'm from the Stormwater team.
My name is Michaela Coleman, and I'm a member of the Stormwater team.
My name is Dan Siebenacker, and I'm with the Stormwater team.
My name is Ashley McDonald. I'm with the Environmental Law Division.
Okay, I failed to say right now, but we have microphones going on. We have Lindsay and Georgia who will be working the room with the microphone. So wait until you get your microphone.
My name is Mike James with James Environmental Management in Round Rock.
Adriana Lee with James Environmental Management in Round Rock as well.
Nate Krupka with James Environmental Management, Round Rock as well.
My name is Cody Sawyer, and I'm with PB Materials.
My name is Lizzie Sawyer, and I'm with PB Materials in Odessa.
Tammy West, the City of Austin, Austin Water.
Jody Cope, Environmental Affairs, United Airlines, Houston.
Shane Zant with Brazos Electric in Waco.
Dieter Schultz, ExxonMobil.
Sarah Schaller, Arcadis from Houston.
Godson Gumadi with Arcadis from Houston.
Valerie McNatica, Westinghouse Motor Company in Round Rock.
Susan Meckel, Lower Colorado River Authority Water Quality Protection.
Christine Hansen, Texas Materials and Texas Concrete.
Doug Wilcox with Texas Materials, Texas Concrete.
Dale Kerstetter, Rio Grande Valley Sugar Growers, Santa Rosa.
Lori Council, UIC staff.
Tamara Young, TCQ, UIC Permit Section.
Simon Nguyen, Martin Sprocket and Gear.
Mario Majorana, Martin Sprocket and Gear in Arlington.
Tennille Thomas, Enforcement Division, Compliance Monitoring.
Macy Beecham, TCQ, Enforcement Division.
Christopher Ryman, Ranger Environmental Services out of Austin.
Zachary King, TCQ Program Support.
TJ McCausland, Stericycle.
Julie White, City of Austin Watershed Protection.
Terrence Simmons, Eddie Packing and Yoakum.
Katie Arnold with Baker Botts.
Anthony Betters, MS4 Compliance, City of Waco.
Gazala Gadamkani, Nucor Steel, Texas.
Colby Lane, Nucor Steel, Texas.
Jacqueline Perrin, Lloyd Goslink, Austin.
Stephanie Albright with Lloyd Goslink in Austin.
Alyssa Cook, TCQ Water Quality Division.
Dalila Loyaco, Stormwater Team, Water Quality Division.
Aaron Dunn, Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies in College Station.
Taylor Telleg, Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies in College Station.
Adam Conti with Civil Environmental Consultants in Austin.
And last, Corey Perkin with Civil and Environmental Consultants in Austin.
Okay, Travis?
Travis Tim with the Customer Information and Assistance Team within the Water Quality Division. I will be assisting with the meeting and also reading off questions that come in via webcast attendees.
Okay, thank you, everybody. That gives us, a clear idea who's here. And like I said, we have over 200 attending via webcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So as Vanna said, thank you for coming. This is one of the initial steps when we start the renewal process. We have various steps that we need to follow. Typically, most of the general permits start a year and a half before they're expired to start the renewal process. However, because stormwater is different, we almost start pretty much almost 2 years before, because we do, we do have a stakeholder process that we feel is important for our permits since we regulate so many entities. So the purpose of this meeting is for us to hear your input, your feedback, any comments, questions you have. We want to improve the permit. That's the purpose of our job. Every permit cycle, we want to have a permit that's more easy to read, clear to understand, hopefully also protective of the environment. Stormwater is an iterative program. Every time we need to do better. Unfortunately, we have water bodies that sometimes are not getting healthier, they're actually getting sicker. So we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can, that you all that are regulated are doing everything that you can to improve the environment. So we're here to listen to you, your input, concerns, anything that you feel we should consider. We're happy to consider them. We do take every single comment to heart. We look at it closely. We discussed it amongst ourselves as a team. We talk to legal, to management. So we do a lot of work in order to determine whether we are going to be able to make a change based on the comment or suggested language. So with that in mind, we will go ahead and start. And again, this is an open forum. We have a little presentation that we're going to give you just to make sure that everybody comes up to speed in case you forgot what the stormwater permit was for the industrial sectors. But we then have an overview of our preliminary proposed changes. So I want to stress the fact that, some people say, well, isn't that redundant? You say preliminary and proposed. They're proposed, but they're still preliminary. So we don't want everybody to think, that we're limited to those. This is just what we initially have determined. We're definitely open to more things, even those that are proposed, depending on which one it is, we're open to looking at it differently, revising it. So please, feel free to speak. Again, administrative issues or items. The water fountain is right out here. The restrooms also are right out here if you go out that door, the men's restroom and the women's restroom, so feel free to go if you need to. When we do get to the portion for the question and answer or just to hear your comments, we do have microphones. Please do not speak until the microphone gets to you, because that way we can hear you as well as people that are over the internet, they can hear you as well. So please, wait for the microphone. Also, we want to hear everybody, so we want everybody to have the opportunity to ask their questions or comments, whatever you want to say, we're okay with that. So please, be professional and polite. Silence your cell phones as well. If you do have to take a call, please, step outside to take the call. We have this room till noon, so we have 2 good hours to listen to you. I will say right away, we will start with a quick overview. All right, I just turned myself off. I don't need to. Okay. So the existing general permit was issued on August 14 of 2016. It expires in 2021. All of our general permits are issued for 5 years. So this is a 5-year permit. Right now, we are 2 years short of it expiring, and that's why we started the renewal process already. As of last month, our universe is 8,636 entities that have a notice of intent, and 3,831 entities that have a no exposure certification. So as you can see, our universe is pretty big. So this is what this general permit regulates. This is the universe. We did a kickoff meeting internally within our team in September. So that's when we said, okay, we're starting the renewal process. Hannah, she didn't say so, but she is our project manager for the multi-sector general permit, so she's the lead responsible for drafting the permit. Michaela is responsible for the benchmark monitoring portion of the general permit, but we all work as a team. We all meet, discuss items. So feel free to, talk to any of us, later on if you need to, but just know that Hannah is the main project manager. So once we had that set in place, we announced that we were starting the renewal process. We sent out emails. We did an advocate newsletter. We also sent Gov delivery announcements. We revised our web pages to say this is what we're doing. We announced the stakeholder meeting. So that is part of our renewal process kickoff that we started. And of course, one of the things that we did is that we go first internally. So the proposed preliminary changes that we're presenting to you are based on internal comments. We send an email to certain program areas in the agencies, such as the industrial team, small business local government assistance, our investigators, Office of Enforcement and Compliance. We send out various, I think also the solid waste people, the TMDL people. So we send out this permit to many and said, okay, this is the existing permit. Tell us what didn't work, what you think needs to be changed. Did rules change? Did things change that we need to address? So we compiled internal comments. So that was one of the things that we do initially. Then the other thing too is that over the permit cycle, we get comments from you, from entities, from our investigators internally. We have comments based on the phone calls that we get. So we compile those. We save them and then we compile them. And so we looked at those comments or those suggestions, questions, feedback as well. So based on all of that, that's how we came up with our preliminary proposed list of changes. So of course, here we are, October 18th, having the stakeholder meeting. And please note that this is not the only opportunity you have to give us comments right now. You have until November 1st to submit any comments via email. We welcome them. Our email box address is going to be on the last slide, and is swgp@tcq.texas.gov. But you have it on the slides, and the slides are posted on the website as well as the handout and the agenda. Okay, so a really short synopsis. We're not giving you all the steps. As Vanna says, this renewal process at TCQ is a lengthy process. We have a lot of steps, and we pretty much look at it in 3 phases. The first phase is this phase that we are gathering information. So this is where we are, getting input, figuring out what kind of permit we're going to prepare. So this month, we're having the stakeholder meeting. Then Hannah and staff, we have until March to work on the permit. So we're going to prepare the draft permit, considering all the comments, to research, discuss things with whoever we need to discuss to make decisions. And then we'll have a draft permit that we will begin the process of then sending it out to our internal program areas to say, okay, this is our proposed permit. Now we have a draft permit. Provide us feedback, and then we will begin the upper management briefing. So we brief all the way up to our executive director regarding our proposed changes. They need to know what's going on, why we're changing something, or anything that might impact the agency and how. And so then we get permission to go to EPA. So then the EPA receives the permit, the draft permit. They have 90 days to review the permit. They could come back with an objection letter, and the objection letter would have items that we have to revise, otherwise they will not approve that permit. Or they can come back and say, we just have comments. It's up to you if you want to consider them. Or they can come back and say, approved, no comments. We're hoping for that last one. Last permit cycle, we were very happy to find out EPA approved it. They just asked us a couple of questions, and that was it. They approved the permit. We didn't have to go back and forth through the objection process. So that was really good. We're hoping for that again this time. Then after that, then we're going to brief management. If we have to make any changes based on EPA's review. Again, if needed, we'll do research, discuss with legal internally, and then we'll go ahead and somebody, sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, Travis, I'm not doing it. Okay, thank you. So then in December, once we get permission to publish, we're hoping that in December of 2020, so almost a year from now, we're going to publish the permit in the newspapers, a couple of newspapers across Texas and also in the Texas Register. So that's when the official formal comment period begins. So it will be available for 30 days. Anybody can make comments on the draft permit. It will be posted on the website as well. And then we make changes, respond to those comments formally. Those comments will be addressed in what we call the executive director's response to comments document, which becomes a final document that is also part of the permit once it's issued. And that document is very important. So I do want to suggest that if you ever have questions, go through the response to comments documents for every permit iteration that we've had, because sometimes we do not make changes to a permit, but we clarify or we explain the intent in those response to comments, and definitely also in the fact sheet. So those are important documents for you to have as well. And then our hopes are that in July of 2021, we come to this room in front of the commissioners and request approval of the permit. And then it will be effective August 14 of 2021. So that is really short synopsis of our timeline and the steps that we have. But like I said, in between, there's a lot of work, a lot of briefings, and a lot of discussion and research that is done to have a permit. So that's a quick overview. Thank you. And so now Hannah will go into the actual permit overview.
Yeah, so we'll focus on the list of changes that you hopefully all got as a handout. But this general permit, the multi-sector general permit, regulates stormwater discharges from industrial facilities throughout the state of Texas. And also for certain allowable non-stormwater sources that are listed in the general permit are permitted. And we're talking about stormwater that has been in contact with manufacturing, processing, and raw material storage areas. Facilities that are required to get covered under the multi-sector general permit are those that are listed in our stormwater regulations, the 40 CFR 12226. And the multi-sector general permit has 30 sectors, sector A to sector AD, and each sector has a group of similar industrial facilities conducting this similar industrial activities. Coverage is based upon a facility's primary SRC code, a facility's activity codes. There are 4 sectors in the general permit that has activity codes, and then there are some discharges, stormwater discharges that are regulated under the 40 CFR parts 400 to 471, which are subject to federal effluent limitation guidelines. Also, a facility can be designated under the TCEQ under Sector AD as requiring permit coverage. These are the requirements in the general permit. Facilities are required to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Once they've done that, they'll send us a notice of intent. There are sampling requirements that needs to be done. There are quarterly visual monitoring. There are quarterly requirements for inspection of controls. Some facilities are required to perform benchmark sampling, and then there's an annual site compliance report that's required. We don't have this on this slide, but about I guess a third of our universe have a no exposure certification, where an NOI is not required, but and a stormwater pollution prevention plan is not required. But those facilities that still send us an application, and then they need to maintain no exposure throughout their permit term. And then we'll go into the changes. And as Rebecca said, those changes are based on comments we got from TCEQ staff, and then also things that we read and felt that needed to be updated. So first of all, we have a long list of SRC codes in the beginning of the multi-sector general permit. We are going to add the NAICS codes to the table. We are also proposing to add provisional coverage for paper application, or change that from right now it's 7 days, and we're changing that to 48 hours to be consistent with other general permits. People submitting delegation of signatory letters, right now they do it with a regular letter to us. That creates a lot of paperwork. So we are proposing to have a form in STEER so people, they can do that online. Reporting requirements for sector-specific numeric effluent limits, those requirements that are in Part 5 of the general permit. We're going to improve the tables so it's very clear which activities actually are required to do those monitorings. So the tables are going to be more like the benchmarks tables, where it'll specifically say what activity it is, and then you'll have pollutants and what the limit is. Also, in Part 5, there's language about how to submit the monitoring results, and it's all based on paper, because that's how the requirements were when we wrote the permit 5 years ago. So now we're going to move those reporting requirements to Part 3 of the permit, which has a lot of reporting and monitoring language already. We are going to make it more clear and focus more on the e-reporting net DMR requirements in the permit, because once we issue this permit, then all reporting will have to be done through e-permit, except some waivers that we have to issue. But the hazardous metals, they're going to be done by net DMR. initially, but initially it's one of those parameters or sampling where we have to issue an electronic reporting waiver because the NetDMR system at that time we issue the permit will not be able to receive those type of samples. The same for pollutants of concern. We'll have to issue a temporary e-reporting waiver for pollutants of concern monitoring. Benchmarks will be on NetDMR, and also sector-specific numeric effluent limitations will be required on NetDMR. And there are no changes in submittal deadlines or when people are supposed to submit their data. That's going to be unchanged. Then we're proposing that the requirements to document criteria used to claim hazardous metals monitoring waiver that needs to be included in the SWIP. Based on our benchmark analysis that Michaela is going to discuss, we are proposing to adjust 2 benchmark values, one in sector U and one in sector T. On the notice of intent, we need to require more information from operators, and that's directly related to the e-reporting rule because the NetDMR system needs to know in advance whether it needs a monitoring report. So we are adding that operators need to include whether they have the sector-specific activities that includes numeric effluent limitations, whether they are discharging a pollutant of concern, whether their facility status is active or inactive, and if there are changes to any of those items, then it would require submittal of a notice of change. So if changes to a pollutant of concern discharge, we need to know that. If the facility status changes from active to inactive or vice versa, we'll need to know that. Outfalls, if they are moved or changed, we need to know that. And also the waiver that's available for benchmark monitoring after the first 2 years, and also for the hazardous metals that needs to be reported on an NOC as well. Then on sector J, we are proposing to add some additional SWIP requirements based on the construction general permit, TXR 150,000. And we've been looking at off-site vehicle tracking, BMPs, and also dewatering activities. And if you look at the handouts, there's the 2 paragraphs that we are considering. Under sector L, we are proposing to add definitions for final cover and immediate cover. Under sector L also, we are proposing to revise the language for sitemap elements. And then also we are going to look at the entire general permit and then clarify language, update and revise tables. And now Michaela will talk about the benchmarks.
Okay, so we'll switch to talking more about how we evaluated all of the benchmark values you've been sending in. But before we do that, just a little review on what benchmarks are and how they're used in the permit. So we use those benchmarks to characterize the discharges from your regulated activities. And they're only required for certain sectors. About 21 of the 30 sectors have benchmark requirements. And if your monitoring values are higher than those benchmark values in the permit, it's not a violation. It's just a requirement for you to adjust your best management practices and update your SWIP to try and address that higher value. So you are submitting that sampling data to us by March 31st of each year. Unless you have a waiver. So we do have the waiver option for years 3 and 4. If all of your data in years 1 and 2 indicate that there's no exceedance of the benchmark values, then you have the option to waiver out of submitting that data in year 3 and 4. So since we've been receiving all of your data, we compile everything we receive for years 1 and 2. And even though we said that, we didn't kick off the renewal of this permit until September, we started working on the benchmark analysis over the summer in May and June. So we started inputting all of the data we've received from all of our permittees and performing an analysis. So the start of that analysis was reviewing all of the analysis we've done in the past. So in 2011's renewal and the 2016 renewal, we have all of that data still. So we look at all of the data we received during the permit term as well as in past permit terms to determine how we might adjust those values for the upcoming permit term. We typically try and set those benchmark values close to the median. We use that as our measure of central tendency because it's a little bit more representative of the data than a mean would be, since it's not a typical normal distribution, so there's more variability in the data. So we run descriptive statistics on the numbers just to see how everything falls, what's the high and the low, find that median, and just generally get a good view of how that data is distributed. And we do this at the pollutant level, we'll do it at the sector level, and then we do it with each of the SIC code groupings as well. And then we analyze and come up with our proposed changes. So once we've run all of our descriptive statistics, we also put them in graphs. So we compare how did the data fall this year compared to last year for the same, group in the same SIC code groupings. So we lay them out on a graph together and see, how similar is that distribution. We'll compare the median to the current benchmark value. Where does the median fall to see how well everyone was able to achieve the benchmark over the course of the permit term. And that's the primary way that we're kind of looking to see what's changed. Is everyone doing okay with this benchmark value? Is it way too high? Is it way too low? And that can help us determine if we need to adjust based on our Texas specific values. So historically, I said we've been evaluating the data each year and making changes accordingly. So in 2006, we increased 3 different benchmark values and we decreased 7. In the 2011 renewal, we increased 2 and we decreased 8. And then in 2016, we decreased 3. So we're proposing 2 decreases for this permit term, which would be lowering total suspended solids for Sector U, only for the specific SIC codes between 2074 and 2079. The current benchmark is 100, and we're proposing that we lower that down to 50 to be consistent with some of the other SIC code groupings with the TSS value. And we'll look at these graphs in just a minute. We're also proposing to lower biochemical oxygen demand from 20 to 15, and that's just for Sector T. I believe that they're the only sector who's monitoring for that. So first, we're going to look at that TSS value for our Sector U. This is a graph. You can see the blue dashed line shows the median for these values. Then our red line above that is what we're proposing to move the benchmark to. And then our blue line is the existing benchmark, and then each of the X's would be the data points. And it looks like there's not a lot of data. There's only 24 points on there, but the universe is only about 13 entities during this permit cycle. So we feel that's a pretty representative sample. To feel, even more strongly about why we believe we should lower it, and we believe that the 50 milligrams per liter would be a more appropriate benchmark. We have here a view of what the median has been over the course of 3 different permit terms. So in our 2011 renewal analysis, you can see that the median value is much higher. And then in 2016, there was a great decrease. And then again, this permit term, so we feel confident that technology is getting better, their best management practices must be, improving, and that it's possible that they're going to be able to meet that 50 milligram per liter benchmark, and that will help them, better evaluate what's happening at their site. So now we'll switch to our Sector T. So here we have, the data distribution for this permit cycle. Again, that dashed blue line shows the median, and then we have the red line for what we're proposing to lower the benchmark to, and then the solid blue line is the existing benchmark. So you can see we're proposing to lower it to a number that's still well above the median. It's also well above the third quartile, which I believe is 9 for this data set. So, 75% of those dots essentially are falling below 9 milligrams per liter. So we feel confident that most of our permittees should be able to achieve that benchmark, and that will be a value that's more helpful to them to find where they can improve at their site.
Okay. All right, so then we continue on now that we have a statistical degree in PhD in benchmark analysis. It is a very interesting, if you like numbers, it's very interesting, and there's a lot of data. I mean, we had a lot of bins, because right now the benchmark reports are on paper. We had a lot of bins, a lot of data to enter, a lot of graphs to look at. We couldn't present everything to you, but we do have here a binder that has every graph for every sector, for every SIC code that we have. So we printed it all out. We'll be happy to show you those graphs later if you're interested in what the data looks like for your sector that you are in. We'll be happy to show it to you. But what other changes do we have? So we talked about some, general changes that, Hannah discussed, and then now you know how we derived that changing potentially to benchmark values. So these items that we just presented to you is what we know so far. We are comfortable with proposing these changes. We're open to suggestions, feedback, things that maybe we didn't consider regarding these changes. And we're also open to any other things that you want to discuss. There is something that we want to tell you that is an unknown for us, and I wish we knew more at this point. But EPA's general permit that regulates or that's used to regulate certain parts of the nation that don't have NPDES authorization, that permit does not apply here in Texas. However, it is a national permit, and so it has visibility. So that permit is going to expire next year, 2020. I think it's June 2020. So because of that, they are writing their permit. We were trying to figure out what they were doing, what it's going to look like, but they said the draft was not be available until next month, potentially. It could be later, but right now they're saying November they will have a draft available for review. Apparently their process is a lot quicker than ours. But anyway, so we don't know what EPA is going to have in their general permit. Usually, if they have something in their permit, then they mandate or require or recommend, depending on what's going on, that states that have authorization do something similar in their general permit. So that's an unknown. We can't tell you what we're going to do based on the EPA's permit because we don't have it yet. The other thing that is also an unknown is what we call the National Academies of Sciences 2019 study. So EPA was challenged, and there's a court order where EPA had to fund a study. And so the National Academies of Sciences performed that study, and they provided the report earlier this year, I think it was March or April of this year, where they are recommending changes that EPA needs to really, really, really look at and consider for their current general permit that they're revising. So basically, EPA has to take those items, those recommendations to heart. We did talk to EPA Region 6 as well as EPA headquarters to see if they can give us any insight of, okay, these are recommendations, how are you going to take them? And they said, well, no, it's a court order. They're required to take those recommendations and implement them. So even though the recommendations, EPA is required. And of course, here at the state level, if it's not in the rule, then we don't need to take it. Of course, we do consider if there's something that makes sense, something that is better for the environment, something that is providing some good improvements, for the industry as well, without impacting the environment, then we consider that. So we are on the edge of our seats waiting to see what EPA is going to do with this study. But this study is focused on some information, data benchmarks. They're saying, okay, technology has changed, EPA. Your benchmarks are based on data from a long time ago when they first started their permit. Science has changed, technology has changed, industries have changed. You need to reconsider these benchmarks. And you need to reconsider what these benchmarks really mean for some of the industrial sectors. So that's basically what this study is saying. Then they also said, well, first you need to look at the benchmarks, but then also you need to consider, is there a better way to approach these benchmarks or the monitoring required for some of the industrial sectors? So maybe if there's a facility that's low risk, instead of requiring them to monitor, maybe they should just do an inspection only and document that inspection, keep that on site, and they don't have to monitor. Now, what a low-risk facility is something that EPA would have to come up with that criteria. They have some suggestions, but they didn't say this is the criteria that has to be used. Also, they said, well, maybe there could be some industry-wide monitoring that's required. How about TSS, pH, and COD? They feel that everybody needs to be sampling for those. It shouldn't be just for a certain sector. Everybody should be sampling for those. So what about that? They also are addressing the fact that some, benchmarks, as Michaela said, benchmarks are not an enforceable limit. It is a benchmark. It's a goal. Your BMPs need to be revised, addressed to make sure that you are below that benchmark, because that's a threshold that we have. And if you're exceeding that benchmark, then that means your BMPs are not as good as they could be, and you need to figure out how to revise them. But there's some entities that just consistently are over those benchmarks. Apparently, they don't do anything about it. And so that's what this study identified. The study said, well, for those entities that really are not taking benchmark values seriously, we need to do something else. So if they're continuously exceeding that, they should be monitoring more. If they're exceeding that, let's figure out how they can revise their BMPs. So they're trying to put a focus as well on those. So they're looking at low-risk industries as well as high-risk industries. And they're trying to strike a balance with that. So that's, to us, important on how EPA is going to handle that. So we do want to say, with a disclaimer, that we do not know what we're going to have to do based on that. We did see with the construction general permit, if any of you were part of that process, where, we were sweating that EPA was coming down to us and saying, this permit's not clear, specific, and measurable. We received I think 80 comments from EPA, and that permit, we have to issue it on time, because if we don't issue it on time, then new construction in Texas is just halted. And so we can't have that, we can't have construction in Texas just be halted because we're negotiating with EPA. So we know EPA is going to be looking at, they are looking overall at permits more closely, more scrutiny. They're looking, is it clear, specific, and measurable? Do you have ambiguous wording? Those kinds of things. But in addition, we do not know how they're going to handle this study, because the study is recommending some changes that are not easy to make. So anyway, keep an eye on that. Sorry, here are the recommended changes that I just went through, but the study is really interesting to read. That's the website where you can go look at the study, the whole report in more detail, and so it's interesting read. Okay, so now that we've given you overview presentation, the handout that Hannah mentioned is a one-page handout. That's sort of supposed to go hand in hand with the presentation. In some cases, we actually gave you the language that we're going to use, either the additional language or the strikeout language, or explained a little bit more. But please, what we just presented, what you have in your handout, and anything else, if you don't come forward to give us any comments or input, please submit your comments to the swgp@tcq.texas.gov mailbox. Dan is the one that is responsible for that mailbox. So we will be looking at that, all those emails. But of course, since that mailbox also gets all these other everyday questions for construction, municipal, industrial, please title it in the subject line MSGP renewal so that we don't lose it and it's easy to filter and identify. And again, the deadline is November 1st to email them to SWGP. So based on that, now we are open to any questions, feedback, input, comments. You don't need to come up to the podium. I said earlier, come up front, but you don't need to come to the podium. We will hand you a microphone, and then you're free to give us your comments, your input. We will take note of that and try to address that if we need to hear. If not, we're just going to take your comment and take it back and review it, research it as needed. So, any questions right now? Feedback, raise your hand. Who wants to go first?
Okay. I have two comments. Hopefully they're simple. One, as far as record keeping.
I'm sorry. One thing. Can you tell us who you're with, please?
Valerie Mickna, Tico Westinghouse Motor Company in Round Rock. As far as the record keeping requirements in the current SWIP, would like the language simplified to say that all required records should be just legible and readily available and not be stored in any specific manner, as long as they are legible and readily available, to take into account anyone's record-keeping system, regardless of their organization. And number two, last time on Steers, the outfall numbers were already pre-filled, which didn't correspond with my existing outfall numbers. I would like for that to be not pre-filled, and we just add our own, as long as we don't duplicate numbers.
Yes, believe me, that is a battle that I try to fight for you all, not knowing that was something I thought that's really weird, and I was told that was the way it had to be done, and I said, you don't realize that people already have their outfalls named something else. It's not 001, 02, 03. It could be AP1, or sewer or something different. And I said, that means they're going to have to go through and revise all their SWIPs. And this doesn't make sense. And they said, well, this is how the system is. And they're just going to have to, in their SWIP, say outfall, A13 equals 001. So that's how they said it to me. And it wasn't something that was available for me to continue pushing. But we will try to see if things change, and it's been almost 5 years, maybe the system changed and we can do something differently. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay. Anybody else? We have plenty of time.
Rebecca,
we have a whole hour.
We did have one question that came in from a webcast attendee, Denise Ehrlich, with the Gulf Coast Authority, asks, if we submit an NOC for a waiver from either benchmark monitoring or hazardous metals monitoring, will we still need to submit a DMR via net DMR?
So that's specifically why so that's a good question, Denise, hello. That is why we are going to do what we're doing with the notices of change that Hannah mentioned, and is more spelled out in your handout. Because when you go into NetDMR and we say, okay, ISIS, NetDMR, this permittee exists, it's under this sector, and it's going to be, knowing, okay, I'm going to be receiving benchmarks, hazardous metals, federal limits, whatever. So it's going to be waiting. So every time the due date comes, it's going to expect a report. And right now, since we get everything on paper, it's a lot of manual work to go through and stop it. That's why we right now issued a waiver not to use NetDMR, because we're not ready for that, but we will be when this permit gets issued. And so the system is going to be flagging saying we need a report. So that's why we need a notice of change. So you're going to submit a notice of change, and then you're going to waiver out, and then that's going to then tell the system we don't need to get a report from them anymore, so it'll stop the DMR flag from continuing to find a report or to look for one. And so that should avoid any non-compliance issues if you do submit that waiver. But if you don't submit that notice of change to indicate that, then the system's going to expect that report, and it'll show as non-compliance. So that's something that's going to be changed to make sure that, you know, if you're a consultant, that you report back to all your clients to let them know that we're going to have to go through the electronic world. We're going to have to get there. We're mandated by EPA. There's a rule. And so the rule just was extended a little bit ago, proposed to be extended from December 2020 to December 2023. So we have a couple more years to get there, but with our permit being renewed in 2021, you know, we are going to be ready potentially to do that. But yes, that is a change that is going to impact how we do things right now. Other questions? You're quiet. Any questions on what we presented? Comments? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. My name's Mike James with James Environmental in Round Rock, and we represent the auto recyclers and the scrap metal industries for the state. And in the state of Texas, we have hazardous metals monitoring, as you know, across all sectors. And we would like to plant the seed, continue to plant the seed, even though it's a snowball rolling downhill that may not change. But we would like to continue to plant the seed that we don't do hazardous metals monitoring in other states. And if there's value added to the water quality of water in the state, then we think we understand why we would do it. But we suspect that the data would indicate that that test result is not bringing about a change in the quality of water. And we would just like to continue to press that concern. One last one is, we happen to have knowledge that the largest percentage of the folks that might fall under Sector M and Sector N, I can't speak for other sectors, but there's a very large percentage that never file an NOI. We would like to recommend improved or increased enforcement so that all members of the community are enforced upon equally. Whether it's going to be no enforcement or heavy enforcement doesn't matter, as long as it's equal across the whole sector.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. We will pass your second comment to our Office of Enforcement and Compliance. We do have representatives here. But touching base just a little bit on your first comment regarding hazardous metals, we appreciate your comment. One thing I do want to mention, Texas is different. We're unique in a lot of things. That's why I say we're almost like a whole other country, not just because we're big, but because of other things. We do have something unique that I'm not sure if other states have, but we have something that's called the Texas Hazardous Metals Rule. So that is 30 TAC Chapter 319, that requires the agency to address and regulate hazardous metals being discharged to both inland waters and tidal waters. We're taking your comment. We will look into it, see if there's anything that can be done. But for now, we do have that rule that I think is the driver behind this. And this rule is addressed in all the other permits, whether individual or general as well. But we will take in your comment and we'll look at it. We'll work with legal to see, and management to see if there's anything that can be done different at all. Any other input, questions?
Rebecca, we got another comment that came in from a webcast attendee, Steve Berry with Jones Carter. Steve comments, please allow more time from when the NOI is available to the deadline when the NOI must be submitted to allow time for water district boards to be briefed on the stormwater requirements and to give authorization to amend the SWP3 and the subject NOI. If the NOI is released the day after a board meeting, then we lose a month until the board can give authorization to the consultant.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for your comment. And I think what you're addressing is when the permit is issued, there is 90 days from permit issuance for the renewal period of a notice of intent to be submitted. Is that correct? I'm not sure if he can reply, but we can communicate.
I'll let you know if he does.
Yeah. But yes, Steve, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question, but I think you're talking about the renewal deadline. Thank you for your comment. Anything else? You're so quiet. That's good. That means our permit is awesome, right? And the changes are good. Yeah, it's not like I really pressuring you for comments, but okay, Anthony.
Anthony Better, City of Waco. The question I have is that any changes or demands that are going to be enforced by the MS4s as they oversee the MSGPs?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this has very big effect on the MS4 community.
Feedback, questions, comments? Anything else on webcast, Travis?
Nothing else from our webcast attendees.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for attending. Like I said, if you're interested, we have the benchmark binder that has all the graphs here. If you want to look at what your sector looks like or any other sector, feel free to come up. We have our business cards here if you also want to get one of our business cards. I'm sure we have handouts left over. If you want to take some for a coworker, somebody else, or a client, feel free to take that, but everything is posted on the website. We're not going to respond formally to these comments. We're just going to compile them and, look at them, review them, see how we need to address them. But other than that, again, you have until November 1st to provide any written comments to the SWGP mailbox. Remember to put in the subject line MSGP renewal. But other than that, thank you so much for your time. Drive back safely. Have a great weekend. We'll be here for questions if anybody's shy and wants to come person to person.